Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Let's get it. What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the Weekly Intention with Michael Mulder and Phoebe. Before I get into her and kind of share who she is, I want to ask you guys one thing. If this helps you guys in any way at all, help me share this. Help me share with somebody, subscribe, like it. Obviously, I'm not getting paid to do this, so you guys sharing this is how I spread the message, especially with everything going on in the world. We could use a little positivity.
That's right.
That's right.
Support the dream, baby.
Support the dream. So, as I mentioned today, I'm joined by someone very, very special. She has her own marketing agency. She's a model. She's overcome a lot of things in her own life, and she's the epitome of what it means to never settle. So, welcome to the Weekly Intention, Phoebe Davis.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to dive into the conversation today. Let's do it.
Most definitely. So, how I usually kick these things off is usually everybody on my show, I should say, has a good story, and it all starts with their past and what they've overcome. Childhood, yeah.
Dun, dun, dun.
I feel like if childhood was really, really good for you, then
would I even be here?
I don't know. Usually not, actually. Come to think of it.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong.
The most messed up childhoods. And I mean, not everybody has that story. Not everybody makes something great out of themselves. I feel like it's more the rarity than the rule to do that. So, I mean, I know what it's like to grow up in a small town in South Dakota. You grew up in a small town of Spokane, Washington.
That's right.
Where you had childhood bullying. You had some things you just felt like you didn't like really belong. I would just love for you to give me like a brief breakdown of what it was like growing up there, not feeling like you wanted to be here, that whole deal.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in Spokane, Washington. And that's in Eastern Washington, opposite side of the state from Seattle. But as a kid, I was really overweight and heavy, and I was bullied a lot for that. And I sort of played sports. I played middle school volleyball and softball, but I was not athletic. So I found my, extracurricular activity to be in theater. So I did musical theater. I took voice lessons, piano lessons. So the creative arts in that sense was my sport. So I think because I was chubby and because I was a theater nerd, I was a very easy target for a lot of kids. And I literally was bullied from elementary school all the way. Even now, I'm on social media, so I have a little bit of a bigger target on my back for different reasons.
Yeah. Most definitely.
Yeah. But even in college, people were still spreading rumors about me that weren't true. And then they always centered around my weight.
That's messed up.
Yeah.
Even in college.
You don't say. I know.
I know how you feel. Growing up in South Dakota, I was the opposite. I was the scrawny kid. I didn't have any problems being overweight, but it was always never being strong and never feeling like I fit in because I couldn't do the sports. I didn't have the older brother who played baseball or played football. And in small towns, if you weren't doing those things, you didn't fit in. And for you being in theater or doing that, it's what even is that? People are so easily to criticize things that they don't know about. And if you're not fitting in the mold or fitting in the norm, it's that's bad. That's threatening to me. So what do you think that did to your psyche, I guess, from a young age, or did to your self-belief or self-identity of even how you identified who you were at that point?
Totally. So for me, in order to really make friends and figure out who I was, I just kind of fully embraced the role of the funny fat friend. So I would just I'm funny anyway, so I would always be cracking jokes. I'm hilarious. But I would always be cracking jokes and just kind of be, the comedian of the group. But I was also making jokes at myself and allowing myself to become a target because I was, that's all based on insecurity and just trying to make myself the butt of the joke and all of that. But yeah, that totally affected how I viewed myself, especially when I was younger, because all my girlfriends had boyfriends, and they got asked to the prom, and like I was just kind of the funny fat friend who just bounced around and made people laugh. So it always kind of was this thing in the back of my head, like I'm so much more than this person that everybody's kind of pointed me out to be. And it took me a long time to figure that out, but I just did not want to accept that was my destiny forever.
That's like an interesting point, and I'm almost wondering, like, how did you get to that point? Because when you're going through negative emotions in the beginning, especially, and you've got no reason to believe or no reason to like think that there's a larger picture out there for you, what began to help you paint that picture in your mind? Like, hey, I am meant to be something more. There is something more for me out there.
So it was actually my first boyfriend in college. Yeah, so I didn't really I didn't date at all until I was in college. And mind you, college, I was partying a lot. I was a huge stoner. I had huge gauges in my ear. I smoked cigarettes back in the day. I was a nasty girl from Spokompton, 100%, because I had just accepted, like, this is where, like, I also went to school in Spokane to college.
Hipster vibe, smoking cigs, wearing like
a Hondo P.
The half beanies and the flannels.
Yeah. Exactly. My style to a T with big old gauges. And so I was just like, you know what, this is who I am, like fully embrace it. And my freshman year, actually, technically this was the summer going into my sophomore year, but regardless, there was this guy I was really good friends with. We were big stoner buds. But he was an athlete.
Wasn't supposed to be a stoner.
Yeah, so that's why I'm not revealing names. It doesn't matter. We're 10 years past college. I'm old. Anyway, he had told me, like, we became super close over the summer, and at the end of the summer, he told me that he had like fallen in love with me, and I had never had a guy that I thought was attractive, and two, a guy that was, an athlete, and it was like the dream for me. I had never gotten that kind of attention before. And he made a comment to me that said, if you started working out a little bit, you'd be so hot. And I actually ended up dating this guy for like 5 years.
Damn.
Yes.
There's like truth in that statement, but it's also like very rude.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the approach was super shitty. I'm not going to lie, but in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, one, screw you for saying that. But two, I mean, you're right.
Yeah.
I don't know, because I've never actually committed to that before. And part of me was like, well, I like have this attractive boyfriend now. He's an athlete. Like, I want to get fit. So like that kind of was the underlying motivation to start working out. And that's kind of when I saw the clouds kind of open up for me a little bit, because I was like, oh my gosh, guys are interested in me. And at that time I was like, well, it's definitely for my personality, because I was not fit at that time. But
that's interesting that you say that. So you left that guy, you kind of, I guess, split from the small town. And I think that's where a lot of these bigger things happen that we're going to get into around competing and some of the highs and lows in life. Mm-hmm. So you left that guy, you started to get in shape, and you started to get like that attention. What was like the final driver where you were like, I need to leave this small town to change my identity and make my surroundings match who I want to become?
Right. So after I graduated college, this was in 2015, I moved. So technically I've lived in Scottsdale twice. So I moved here, lived here for 8 months, and I was doing long distance with this particular ex, and was like, you know what, I'm going to move back to Washington for a year, or however long we need to figure out if this is going to work or not. Because at that point we'd been dating for 4 years. It was like, are we going to get married? Like, what's about to happen?
Yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah. So I moved home, and in that year home, I realized none of my freaking friends live here. Like, they were either all living in Seattle because that's where they moved to after college, or they were in Arizona because I moved down to Arizona with my best friend from school, and I had made friends there. So I was like, I don't have any community here. I was starting to gain more weight back after college because I didn't really know what I wanted to be doing yet. I was still working in the marketing world, but I was just like, that was my main priority at the time. So I was in Spokane is actually when I created my Instagram account, Flexing Phoebes, and I originally created a website to like make a blog, and I did Whole30, and I blogged about the whole thing. So that was like the OG.
The Whole30 challenge.
The Whole30.
They used to be legit.
It was super popular back in the day.
Like P90X.
Yeah, that's dated.
That's how I started my journey.
Really?
Yeah, Tony Horton. Every day we were getting it in.
I love that for you.
That was my jam. But anyways, Whole30, you're doing it.
Yeah. So basically, long story short, I was living in Spokane. I had a good job, but I hated being in Spokane because, you know, hometowns, if you didn't have a good childhood, they just kind of have this dark, gloomy cloud over it. My relationship was at very much a dead end because we had very different priorities, and I was starting to pursue my faith a lot more, and he wasn't a Christian, so that was kind of that was ultimately the biggest deal breaker there. But I didn't have any community in the health and fitness space, which is why I created the Instagram account. So that really was like, I got to get the frick out of here. I need to go back to the sunshine in Arizona, get another marketing job, keep just expanding my career, and dive into health and fitness and just start a new life for myself.
So if I'm hearing this right, it's just like negative energy all around you from your boyfriend who you've outgrown, from your environment that you've outgrown, and really nothing that's supporting who you think that you want to be. And you made the decision that I have to get out of here if I'm going to pursue the best version of myself. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people need to do that, honestly. And like, that's the scariest part for like most people. It's like there's that moment where you have to make decisions in life, and there's probably a handful of them when you have to make like a big decision, whether that's leaving a job.
And I'm the worst at decision making. I will just like agonize over which path should I take, but pro and con list. Always make a pro and con list.
Yeah, what's worse, staying the same or making the change? And there's so many small towns in America. Like literally, I'm small town South Dakota. You're small town Spokane. I'm pretty sure you could be small town every single state in the United States.
Oh, 100%. And I feel like all small towns have that. I mean, some people really like living in a small town. Personally, I don't. I felt like I was trapped, and it was like a bubble, and I was like, I'm about to burst out of this bubble.
And there's nothing to say that that's wrong, but this show is all about societal expectations. And
yeah, like, we popped the bubble in here, baby.
We're popping the bubble. That's what I'm about. And like, my show might not be for everybody, but if it's somebody that wants to grow and it's somebody that wants to like pursue a better version of themselves and they don't know how, this is a good place to start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, tune in.
That's what we do in here. Well, that's cool. And then you left to Scottsdale, which a lot of people do, to make that transformation. And then, you know, you pursue a further thing. What came first? That I guess the NPC kind of bodybuilding stuff, or the leaving your career? Where should we dive in first?
Okay, so they very much overlap.
Let's talk about the body image, and let's talk about the self-image, because I think that's an important message to overcome before we talk about like fully being independent, because a lot of people are in the muds, they're dealing with the shit, they're trying to become the best version of themselves, but you're not going to get there unless you deal with those demons first. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the bodybuilding journey.
Okay. So in 2019, I decided that I wanted to start competing. I started following a bunch of competitors on social media, and I was just like, holy crap, their bodies are insane, and I want that. And so a lot of competitors will tell you, do not get into the competing world if you're just trying to have a transformation, because it's a sport. And for me, I was like, I don't give a shit. I'm about to transform my body. So
you didn't take the warning.
I was like, whatever. So I did it. And the reason why I chose competing is because it wasn't solely for the purpose of the transformation, but obviously that played a huge role in that. One, I knew that I needed to commit to something a little bit more drastic in order to see that transformation come through. Just because of my genetics, because of my metabolism, and because of what my body composition was. So I was like, I'm going to invest money into a coach, therefore investing back into myself, and I'm going to commit to this. And that was number one. Number two, I had always been so envious of athletes because I was never one. And I was, made fun of for not being an athlete. So I was like, this is a sport. I'm going to compete and I'm going to give 110% into this. So I have no excuse when I step on stage, like, oh, I skipped that one workout. That's why I didn't win or anything like that. Like I took it. I became obsessed.
Was winning part of the mindset? Like you think about who you were before and then now you found the sport that's satisfying that need to like get over yourself in a way and be what you always wanted to be. Was it like a I'm going to win or die type situation?
It wasn't, but it wasn't like if I don't win this, like it's all for shit. But like doing the competition, I just wanted to know that I never cut myself short. Like regardless of what happened on stage, I wanted to know that I showed up for myself every single time when I didn't want to, or when I could have cheated, or when I wanted to sleep in and skip a workout. I wanted to know that I did absolutely everything. So it didn't really matter so much if I won. I just wanted to know that like I had no regrets of trying to cheat along the way.
You didn't leave anything on the table. You gave it everything.
I gave it everything.
That can be good and bad.
Yes, both. We'll talk about it.
So you put everything into it. How long was the training cycle like to prep for a show? I know I talked to Rachel and she had like a few month period, and I know I actually had her on here when she was at the end of her thing, and she was like, "I'm on fumes. I can hardly deal right now."
Yeah. So it depends on how much time the individual needs to prep for their show. I prepped for 7 months. So I did a 7-month cut, and I started at 60 pounds and my stage weight was 124 pounds.
You cut 36 pounds?
Yeah. So roughly around 40 pounds I lost in 7 months.
Jesus. And that's not like that's not going from like heavy to like, that's not like really, really extra baggage. That's not like fat weight. That's like really cutting it in.
I mean, I had a lot of body fat to lose because I'd never changed my body composition yet. So a lot of it was body fat, which is why when I got down to like peak week, if you look back at those photos, everyone who's on peak week looks like a ghost because they're so depleted, but like I hadn't had muscle built up underneath the body fat. So when I lost everything, I just looked like so skin and bones. I just looked really skinny, like sickly almost. But I was like, oh my gosh, I've never seen my body this way ever. Like I'm a freaking champion. Like, oh my gosh. So I had never seen my body in that light.
I was just going to ask you, like, coming up to the stage and, like, completing the training and doing what you said you were going to do, putting your all into it, and then seeing, like, that image, did you feel at the moment like that was, like, your peak? Like, this is the best that I possibly ever can look? Or what were you feeling in that moment? Because I hear a lot of bodybuilders talk about, like, I can't handle the feeling afterwards because I am chasing the version of what I look like in that moment.
Totally. And that this is the biggest reality check for competitors is show day, peak week, leading up to show day, you are not human. Your body is like straight machine at that point, and you're so like your body fat is so low, so you can just see every striation, every muscle pop. Like it literally is like the peak. So, which is why they call it peak week. So after the show, post show is always the most difficult because, like you were saying, you have this perfect vision of yourself and who just the ideal version of yourself that you've probably never really seen before, but you put in so much work to get to that. And then after the show, you have all this newfound freedom of, oh, I'm not like, I don't have another show coming up for, you know, or if you even have one planned at all, like you don't have to be so restricted with your diet, and you just have so much more freedom. But because you've been restricted for such a long time, you adopt this mentality that I'm an athlete, I am perfect, I'm obsessed with my macros, I will not mess up, I will not do this, like this is who I am. But there's this huge gap, because on the other side it's like, but I want to have a normal life. Like I've been on prep for 6-7 months, I want to go out to a restaurant, I want to have drinks. And then when that happens, like it's like an all or nothing mentality. Like, okay, I never do this, so I'm going to do this once and I'm going to binge and I'm just going to ball out. And then as soon as that's done happening, you're like, oh my gosh, why did I do that? And then that just over time, at least this is what happened for me. I developed super terrible body dysmorphia, and I was binge eating a lot. And those were dark days for sure, because when I started my prep, I was 160 pounds, and then I dropped all the way down to 124. And I did not know what my new normal was. So for me, it was like, if I eat outside of what my tiny, tiny macro range is, I'm going to blow up and I'm going to look like I used to. And like, I was like, hell no, I will never let that happen again.
I think that's a really important fact to key in on, because I think nowadays everyone's chasing this idea of perfect and this concept of like, I have to be this certain thing or whatever. And when you get to a point, like you said, where you've achieved what you want, you never want to go backwards. And it's almost hard at that point to give yourself grace, especially with social media, especially with everything. It's like, I felt that myself, where you get to this point and it's like, I'm finally who I want to become. And then you never want to go back. That it makes you sick inside to think about becoming that person again. And then it's such an unhealthy thing that it completely fucks with your sense of yourself, to where it's not healthy and it's not good.
Oh, you literally could not have said that more perfectly.
I appreciate it. I've thought about it too.
Yeah.
I think everybody thinks about it, but they're scared to say it. I think everybody feels inadequate at some point. I feel like everybody sometimes feels like they're not enough, but nobody's talking about it. Everyone's just painting this picture of everything is perfect all the time. And I do this, and I've got this car, and I've got that. And it's like, it's so important that we're honest with ourselves and other people, because just because you slip up or just because you make a mistake, that doesn't mean that you're less. Just because you fall off the wagon for a day, that doesn't mean that you're a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And I feel like you know exactly what I'm saying.
I do, 100%. And then in addition to that, adding the stress and the pressure from maintaining that image on social media, because my account was a fitness account. I lost all this weight. Like I gained a lot of traction and I gained a lot of followers during that time. So I was so afraid that if I screw up and gain a bunch of weight, that I'm going to undo everything I just did. I'm going to look like a buffoon to all these people that I have, you know, who tell me like, wow, you're such an inspiration and blah, blah, blah. But I refused to hide what I was going through, because I wanted people to know the reality of bodybuilding and post-show, post-competition, all of those struggles, because that's where the hard work comes in. Prep is hard, but the hardest part is post-show. So I talked openly on social media about my binge eating episodes, like I'd be sitting in my car bawling my eyes out because I just binged on nut butters for like 30 minutes. And then out of, you know, feeling so guilty, I would go to the gym and do an hour of cardio. And I would just sit in my car bawling my eyes out on my stories on Instagram, just being like, this is my reality and it freaking sucks. And I don't know what to do.
Let's talk about that moment. Let's talk about like your post show, you're sitting in your car, you're obviously feeling, you know, like you can't be perfect, and you're not like meeting up to your standards, like you're sitting in your car, what does that feel like for somebody who's going through the same thing? Like, what is that emotion? What were you telling yourself? You know, we've talked about the dark thoughts and like the internal chatter. What were you saying to yourself in those moments?
Before getting on my stories, I'm just sitting in my car having the breakdown. It was just, you know, you're a failure. Like how like you were so good and so perfect for 7 months and you can't even make it a day without going over your macros, or, you know, binging on nut butters are my freaking weakness. So they're still my weakness, but I definitely have more control over that now. But it was just, this terrible internal dialogue of you're a failure. You like, who even are you now? Like you're a fake, you're a phony. Like people on Instagram think you're this, and this is the reality. So I think for me, in order to clear my conscious with myself, I was like, I need to get on Instagram and I need to tell people what I'm going through, because I'm not about to just bullshit my way through this. Like if I'm struggling, like people, I believe that the point of having an influencer account is not only to, you know, build a community, but like have that, support that community back. And part of that is celebrating wins and also helping people when they're going through really hard times. So I was like, you know what? I need help from my community and my people, because I'm freaking so depressed and my hormones were jacked and I was binging like crazy. So yeah, I felt like I needed to clear my conscience. So I hopped on my stories and cried.
I feel like that's good. And I was going to ask you how you dealt with that and like how you spoke about that. And I'm a very verbal person too, where I have to speak it out and get it out of my body.
Yes.
Otherwise it's
I'll like hold it.
Yeah. And then it's like, I'm going to freaking explode. So when we're thinking about like people and the concept of perfect, you know, you can never be perfect. There is no perfect. And if you chase perfect, you're going to be waiting a long time and it's going to lead to some really dark places. I've been there. First, walk us through what it's like when you're in that mental state of chasing that, whether that's in your car, binge eating, and how can somebody move on from that dark voice that they're hearing in their head?
I think the biggest thing when I found myself sitting in my car, bawling my eyes out from what I felt like was so out of my control, is pausing and taking a giant deep breath and realizing that your identity is not defined by what you do. I competed. I'm not a competitor. That's not who I am. I'm binge eating. I'm not a binge eater. That's not who I am. I am first and foremost completely and totally rooted in Christ. I'm a daughter of Christ, and God tells us that we should show each other grace and show ourselves grace no matter what we do.
I agree with you. Like having a strong foundation and having a clear why is how you can move forward, because we talk about this, and I've talked about this all the time. I talked about the power of community, and I've talked about how your decisions have to be stronger than your emotional state. If you let your emotions overpower who you are, then you're going to lose every time. So you have to have a foundation that is bigger than just those things, whether it's weightlifting, whether it's nice shirts, whether it's a nice car, any of the stuff that you buy or that you might have. If you don't have something deeper, whether that's religion, whether that's family, whether that's love for yourself, you're always going to be missing that piece. So what would you say to somebody who is missing that piece in their life, who's looking for more and can never be good enough for themselves? That's big.
That's a big question. I will answer it my way. So
that's what I want.
Okay. I think putting so much pressure on yourself to be the one to figure out, how am I going to get myself out of this mess? How am I going to stop this evil chatter in my mind? It's such a lonely place to be in, because it's just you and yourself going through this battle. You don't have a soundboard and you don't have friends that you feel comfortable talking to. Like, First and foremost, for me, it's my relationship with God. I'm a Christian, so my identity is rooted in Christ. It's not rooted in the things that I do, you know, the materialistic things that I have. And it was very hard for me to come to that realization during this period of time, because I had finally become the athlete and I won first place, and it was this whole new identity for me. But once I started slipping up on my macros and having that freedom, I was losing myself, and I felt so confused. Like, how could I possibly have had so much discipline and now I have none? Well, what's going to help you move forward in that is realizing that life comes in seasons. There is a season for being restrictive on your diet. If you're an athlete, then that makes sense. There's a season for having more freedom and wanting to go out and have a few drinks and go on vacations. And there's a season for everything. Your life doesn't always have to be, I am an athlete, I am this way. But throughout all of those seasons, the thing that is constant is that I am a daughter in Christ. And through that, there is grace and forgiveness. And I should be showing that to myself just as much as I show that to other people.
Boom.
Did we get it?
That's what I wanted. Oh, man. That was powerful. That's what's up.
Was it really?
Yeah, of
cool.
course. I love that.
I mean, it's all honest.
It's speaking from your soul. You can tell, and I'm going to put this in this thing. You can tell when somebody's being honest with you, and you look in their eyes and you can see conviction in what they say. You can only BS somebody so much. Like, I can see a liar. I interview a lot of people. And in the
I thought you were going to say I interview a lot of liars.
No. in the beginning of this, my whole goal was like, I just want to interview anybody who's successful, because I thought success is the main metric of this show, and people need to be successful. And then I was like, wait, this needs to help people break societal norms so they can be happy, but it also needs to help them achieve some self-enlightenment and make them a better person, because being successful means jack if you're not happy with who you are and you're not making a difference.
Totally. And success can come in so many different ways. It looks completely different to every person.
Everything comes in seasons, and it's like, okay, now I've fixed my body. Now I've gotten over that by being honest with myself and realizing that it's okay to not be perfect. You know, there's a lot of different components. Like, there's body, there's Christ, there's like, I always think of like financial, health, spiritual, and then being happy and living your purpose and what you do every day. And I think that's where we can talk about work, because my goal for the show is for everybody to peel back layers of themselves and slowly like fix things at I guess one at a time, whether that starts with fitness, whether that starts with their soul and Christianity. Like, how can you continue to add layers to yourself to be totally fulfilled? So now you've gotten over your demons of body dysmorphia. You grew to love who you are and like who you see in the mirror. And that's where modeling and leaving your job comes into play. And that's kind of who you are today.
Yeah. So the timeline of this is very much overlapped with that dark period. So I actually quit my job. I was in the corporate world for digital and social media marketing for since 20, for like 4 years. 5 years. And I quit my job to start my own marketing business in June of 2019. My competition was July 2019. So a lot of the high that I was experiencing from changing my body and competing and winning just fed this belief into my mind that, like, you are a superhero. Like, you've changed your body for the world to see. You're an inspiration. You can, hell yeah, you can quit your job and start your own business. Do it all. Dump your boyfriend too and move out, which is totally what I did.
Oh, so you like...
I literally was like, I'm doing a 180 on my life because...
You torched it and you let it burn.
100%.
Like, all this stuff is...
Yeah, because... And I was reading You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero. Love that book.
Yep.
And so that was really my first exposure to, like, manifesting and creating the world and the world that you want to live in. So as I'm reading this, I'm about to compete. I'm like, fucking hate my job, excuse my language. I can do this on my own. And I was in a very unhappy relationship at the time too. So I was like, and we were living together, which is the first time I've ever lived with a boyfriend. It's not happening again. And it was just toxic. So I was like, I have the power to not settle for this shitty life that I'm living in every day. The only thing that I had good going for me was prep. And that's why I think I was so obsessed with it, because that was my escape.
Is the one thing that you could enjoy out of all of it.
Yes. And I was like, I'm putting all into this because I hate my job. My home life is annoying because I live with a boyfriend that I am not happy with, like a toxic relationship and unhappy career. So I was like, that was my safe haven. So when you're riding this high and you're learning about manifesting, and I'm like, you know what? I am a badass. So I'm going to do all of the shit to my life. And it just so happened to kind of all be at the same time. So after my show, I was like really struggling with my identity and binging and body dysmorphia and all of that. And on top of that, I had just moved into my own 1-bedroom apartment, just ended a relationship, just quit my job and started my own business. So I was like drowning in all of these changes. But also, like, I wanted all of these things, but I had put so much pressure on myself to maintain that superhuman speed, and it was impossible. It was impossible to do. So it was dark days.
How can you possibly live up to an image of like everything changed at once? And it's like, okay, I left my job. I'm a badass. I won this competition. I'm a badass. I ended this relationship. I'm a badass. Yeah. What can I do? You're a fucking champion.
Yeah.
And then
literally.
And it's like, I know full well about that because I have a tough time reeling in my emotions, and I'll have days where I'm like, I can go to the gym twice. I just read an hour long for David Goggins. I did this show. I'm just like running in all cylinders. And the next day I'm like, why did I do
I am so depleted and
why
so
did
tired,
I do all that to myself? I feel like a pile of dump.
Yeah.
So I think the message there is balance. As much as you want to be successful, you need to have balance because you can't win all the time. And if you're expecting to win.
You just gave me goosebumps.
Yeah.
You did.
It's true. It's true.
It's so true. And when you're stuck in that headspace, I mean, it just feels like, wow, I have so much untapped potential that I've never seen before, and I want more of this. What else can I do to disrupt in my life all the things that are making me unhappy, and how can I flip that switch? But I did it in an unbalanced way because it was everything at once versus one at a time. But thank God that I did what I did, because with all those pieces of my life, because I can't imagine where I would still be if I hadn't pulled the plugs on those things and started new chapters.
You got to be willing to deal with the crap sometimes, and like the fallout of making new decisions. And that's something that I think is important to note too. What would you say to somebody who's like in that moment now that you have hindsight looking back, knowing that you aren't perfect and knowing that you needed to give yourself grace in dealing with the fallout? How could you help somebody who's just in the aftermath of what you went through? Like somebody who made a drastic change, is in the low pit because they made the change and they're lost. They don't know what to do.
Yeah. Well, the first thing, like we talked about, is always remembering to give yourself grace. And like you said, perfection doesn't exist. Perfection is made up in our mind by our egos to lead us into chaos, basically. And that's, perfection isn't real. So the number one thing that I wish someone would have told me is, so this is actually one of my favorite quotes. It's, do one thing today that your future self will thank you for. And in that time, I was so caught up in the present moment of how am I even going to get to tomorrow? Like, how am I even going to get through the next couple of minutes? Like, I was so overwhelmed with things to do that I would do nothing. I would just sit on my couch and like cry.
Paralysis by analysis.
Yeah. So taking inspired action and honestly, make a freaking list. Like, put it out in front of you. Like, there's probably so much going on in your head of like, the negative self-talk and the criticism of I'm a failure, blah, blah, blah. Like, I have all these things to do, but I can't do any of them. Just get those thoughts out of your head, put it on paper. For me, it was talking on Instagram. It was talking on my stories because I was talking. It was literally self-talk therapy. I was processing what I was going through. And while doing that, I would kind of come to these self-realizations that like, okay, I do need to show myself grace, because what would I want these people to think? Like if they were saying this, like I would want to be telling them, show yourself grace. So I would be coming to these, realizations through talking it out with myself. And for some people that's journaling, which I also do, but
I love everything that you were saying. And I think a good way to talk, I guess, to tie it up is your motto. You talk about flexing the mind, body, and soul.
mm-hmm.
You develop a good body, you get religion into the mix, you kind of get control of your mind and start giving yourself grace. I think there's a difference between all those things and truly getting into your soul and like being intentful with what you say, being intentful in every day, appreciating the moment. A lot of the things that you're sharing now with your message and who you are, which is really like getting into a flow state and like loving yourself. I would love for you to share with everybody what it means to flex the mind, body, and soul in terms of like a mind-body connection and connecting all those components.
Yeah. So for me, it means, total balance. When you start a physical transformation, any kind of health and fitness journey, it's all body, right? I mean, that's where your attention is. Like, I'm going to get fit, I'm going to look hot, whatever your goal is. But it's impossible to have a physical transformation without a mental transformation too. Because you're, and I like to say you're flexing all of these new skills that you are developing through discipline, through motivation, through grit, all of these new skill sets that you might not have had before. And every time you choose to go to the gym over sleeping in the morning, or every time you choose to not have cake in the office or have donuts in the office, or, bring your own lunch to work, those small decisions add up over time. And those choices are reaffirming those habits that you are creating. And then all of a sudden that's second nature and your mindset begins to switch too. So through a physical transformation, you have that mental transformation. And the soul aspect, at least for me, is going through the ups and the downs of whatever journey it may be, whether that's career, relationship, or, a physical transformation, losing weight. You're going to have ups and downs because that's freaking life. Like we just said, nothing is perfect. But being able to use those trials as your testimony to share with people, this is what I've gone through. There is light at the end of the tunnel. These are my failures, and I'm telling you because I want to help you in some way to avoid the same mistakes that I made. Or if you're going through this, wow, I really resonate with that and I empathize with that. I've gone through that too. And through the soul aspect, you're building community, and for me, obviously faith plays a huge part in that too, because I want God to use me to help other people and to share my story, because I feel like a lot of women especially can relate to a lot of things that I've experienced in my life.
That's incredible. I always end the show with weekly intention, like one thing, but I feel like that was your one thing. I feel like that is, who you are at your core.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, never settle is obviously a huge component, but flexing your mind, body, and soul and being completely connected in harmony, like that's all you could ever want. And that's all I ever want for myself and want for anybody too. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the best takeaway to end it on.
Yeah.
I love doing this. This is an incredible show. There's always an interesting spin on it. And thank you so much for sharing the things that you've gone through. I think that's going to help a lot of people. Like I said, make sure to share, subscribe. Love this thing. We're going to be pushing this out, getting the message out to people. Check me out on YouTube. That's where I'm dropping these full interviews. Your Instagram is Flexing Phoebes.
That's right, baby. And TikTok too. Come dance with me.
And TikTok.
Just kidding. I don't do dances, but I do other things.
There we go.
Yeah.
Are those your two main ones?
Yeah, those are my two main socials. And I have a website and blog. It's flexingphoebes.com. And I write about fitness. Obviously, it's basically mind, body, and soul, shocker. And also fashion and travel I like to include in there as well.
Dope. That's it. I guess we'll just wrap this up.
All right.
That was incredible. Until next time, Michael and Phoebe with the Weekly Intention. Take care, everybody.